Hello and good afternoon. How are you today? I hope you've had a lovely weekend. Oh, my internet seems to be looking a little wobbly, but yep, hopefully that'll be okay. I hope you had a lovely weekend. It's been very sunny here in Lincoln in the UK, where I am living at the moment, and we've been out in the garden planting flowers. We should have been down in Cornwall this week, so we're trying to be sort of outside and having a home holiday. I've still got work to do, but my husband's actually got the week off, so he's been outside this morning planting some flowers in the front garden, and I will be joining him outside this afternoon, hopefully. So I hope you've had a nice weekend. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm talking about people pleasing, and I'll get started on that in a few minutes. Just see who's joining us this morning for today's Strategies for Being Brilliant session, which I do every Monday lunchtime at 12:30, just for around 15 or 20 minutes, and then we have a catch up on Friday again at 12:30, just for a few minutes, just to see how you've got on with some of the ideas. So today's people are starting to join us now. That's good. So today's session is from my first book, Strategies for Being Brilliant, and it is chapter 17, entitled Don't Be a People Pleaser. And this is a challenge, I think, that I've had practically all of my adult life, less so at the moment, but like with all these things I talk about, I'm not immune to these challenges either. And I certainly wrote the book from that viewpoint, as somebody who'd lived through these kinds of challenges, still lives through them in many ways. And it's also a challenge I see often in friends, and certainly when in my work as a coach with my leadership clients, I come across this a lot as well. How do I stop being a people pleaser? How do I start getting my own needs met a little more, rather than always saying yes and agreeing to things and then regretting it later? So what I'm going to do in the next 15 to 20 minutes is share some ideas that have worked for me over the last 20 years or so, and I hope that one or two of these ideas will work for you and you'll be able to put them into practice as well. So we've got Samantha here this morning, Joe, Steve, lovely to see you all, and thank you for joining us. So I'd like to start this session by telling you a story. So those of you who know me and know my background will remember that I lived and worked overseas in Southeast Asia and in Central America for 8 years, and I moved back to live in the UK in the summer of 2010. At one point, morning Joe, at one point when I was living overseas, I was living in Belize, and Nick, who I'm now married to, he was still living in Brunei. So he was in Asia, I was in Central America, and we agreed that we would meet up in San Francisco and have a week's holiday together. I got the flight over to San Francisco, and I was really looking forward to, afternoon Steve, I was really looking forward to having a nice quiet flight for a couple of hours. I boarded, sat in an aisle seat, and there was a woman in the window seat, and between us was an empty seat. We'll call this woman Twaina. Twaina was very drunk and very, very loud, and for the first 45 minutes of the flight, she told me the ins and outs and the ups and downs, literally, of her latest relationship, after which she fell asleep. I took the opportunity at that point to get up and go to the loo, and as I was walking back down the plane, I noticed that actually the plane was only half full, and people kept catching my eye and sort of raising their eyebrows as if to say, "Oh, you poor thing, rather you than me." So I went back to my seat and I sat down again, and of course after a little while she woke up, and because she'd been very drunk she didn't remember what she told me, and started to tell me these stories all over again until we landed, and I last saw her kind of staggering off towards the baggage claim at the airport. Now, I've since reflected on this story and asked myself the question, what on earth made me go and sit back down in the same seat? And of course the answer is, in my head I was busy thinking to myself, What will she think of me if she wakes up and I'm not sitting there? Height of my people pleasing, I think, at that point, obviously, because the answer, of course, is it doesn't matter. Who cares? Who really cares if she wakes up and I'm not sitting there in that seat? And for those of you watching this or listening later or watching on catch up afterwards, you know, you may well have situations like that in your own lives where you have made a decision that afterwards you sit back and you contemplate and you think, why on earth did I do that? Why didn't I choose a different course of action? So what I'm going to share with you today are some ideas and approaches to help you sit in a different seat if you would really like to. And I remember telling this story years and years ago at a networking event, and a friend came up a few months later and she said to me, Sue, I was on this flight last week, and we both laughed because she did actually change seat. So if you have occasions in your life where you would like to change seats a little more easily, metaphorically speaking, of course, then I hope some of the ideas here are useful for you. So the first thing I would say is this. I think the foundation about this is about learning to strengthen yourself. And so the leadership coaching and training work that I do, particularly the coaching, often starts with people strengthening themselves and feeling that they're okay being who they are. And a fundamental part of this is about understanding what your own particular values are. That is what's important to you. And I sometimes think people pleasing is about not understanding that and about helping and ensuring that other people get their needs met at the expense of your own. People pleasing, while it's very nice to be a nice person, and don't get me wrong, I've been a nice person all my life, actually sometimes in life being nice, particularly when it comes to career and business, it's not so nice after a while. Is what I'm saying. It can work against you, it can undermine you. Certainly as a leader or any kind of manager, you may find it hard to make decisions, to challenge people in your role. And in your personal life, if you're constantly trying to please other people, you can end up feeling really quite resentful and angry towards other people, when actually, you know, it's our own self. We've got to sort out what's going on for ourselves. So understanding your own values and what is really important to you. And when you understand that, it's like switching a bit of a light on. It allows you to make better decisions, make more consistent decisions around things that are important to you and ideas that matter to you. Understanding our values is something that most people consciously just don't do. So it might feel a bit strange at first. And the previous chapter in this book talks about identifying your own values. But really, you know, what matters to me? And am I making a decision framed through that lens, or am I always attempting to look through somebody else's lens, which is exhausting and isn't sustainable, and as I said, leaves us feeling quite angry, resentful, and just really not at our best and not at our strongest. So simply starting by understanding what really matters to you and using that sense of what's important and those values to help you make better quality decisions. So this isn't about always wanting to get your own way, and neither is it about always wanting to help other people get their own way. In assertiveness, we talk about I'm okay and you're okay. So what matters to me is important, but what matters to you is important as well, and we get a balance. So that's what that's about. Understanding your core values, what's important to you, and then using that to help you make some more robust decisions without feeling guilty. So the second point I'd like to make to you is understanding that not everybody is going to like, approve, or agree with your decisions, and learning to feel okay with that. So I wrote this book 7 years ago now, in 2013. So I've developed some of the ideas in it, and this is one idea I've particularly worked on developing. And that is that when we pay attention to other people's opinions about us, what we should be doing, we often are paying attention to the wrong people's opinions. So no expense spared this morning. You can see I have done this graphic for you. Okay, and I'd like you to just remember this. Not everybody's opinions are important. We're all important, obviously, as human beings, but we all have a core set of people whose opinions really matter to us, and if we were going to please anybody and make people happy, it's probably the people in that central circle that we should be focusing on. You get to choose who goes in that central circle. For example, just because somebody might be your mother or another close relation, they don't automatically go into that circle if their opinion is not going to help you feel resourceful, confident and strong in what you're doing. Okay, so what happens when we people please? So we have people in the middle whose opinions really matter to us, and then each circle moving out here, these people's opinions and their importance, the importance we place on their opinion of us and what we do becomes less and less and less and less. And what happens when we people please is, instead of, you know, thinking and considering the people in this central circle closest to us, we pay too much attention to people here on the outside, and these circles could move out and out. So when I was on the aeroplane and I went and sat back down in the same seat, I temporarily put Twaina right here in the middle, when actually she's probably off the scale completely. It didn't matter. What she thought of me just did not matter, and I didn't have to work on pleasing her at the detriment to myself. So, you know, a simple thing to do is to think about this circle, and these circles, this diagram may look different in the different circumstances in different parts of your life. We don't show up as the same person often. Sometimes at work we can be slightly different to how we are at home, and that's perfectly okay. It makes you no less authentic for that. It just means we play to different sides of ourselves and different sides of our strengths, but they're all parts of us. We just amplify certain strengths in different situations. Okay, it's who's in that central circle. They're the people whose attention, whose opinions you might want to focus on, and who we might want to pay more attention to. And remember, you get to pop the people in that central circle. Okay, so this is about identifying, if you like, the tribe, the people closest to us. It's also worth thinking about, is there a pattern? Is there a pattern in your people pleasing? So a useful exercise to do is to think back to a situation where you felt you were in full people pleasing mode, and you made a series of decisions or you agreed to things that afterwards you think, why on earth have I done that? Why have I agreed to that? What's going on? Steve, I'm really pleased to hear that. Good. What's going on in those situations? Very often there will be a person or a group of people or a situation or an event. I use the technical word that spooks us, that really prompts this type of behaviour in it. And once you can see a pattern in what's going on, and there possibly will be a pattern, then you can begin to do something about it. Okay, so it's worth sitting down and really thinking about that. Often we fall into people-pleasing mode if we feel put on the spot and pressurised to make a decision quickly. And this is something I have really struggled with over the years, and certainly a lot of my clients have as well. So this is what I would say to you here, is learn to buy yourself some time. So I talk about time, boundaries and breathing. Quick example of this is when I lived overseas, one of the members of staff would come to me first thing in the morning and kind of like just bark a series of things at me, and I had to, in the end, it just completely threw me. Wasn't the way I like to start my day. So in the end I said, look, just leave this with me. I will get back to you by morning break time. And it just gave myself some thinking space. So laying down boundaries with people, and you will know if you need to do that. And I'm not saying this is necessarily always easy, of course. These are things for you to go off and think about. What would be appropriate boundaries for yourself at times like this? You know, breathing down into our feet and buying yourself some time, even if it's only to say, give me 10 minutes and I'll come straight back to you. I've found over my life that other people's sense of urgency doesn't have to become mine, and in most cases, I'm not saying in all, but in most cases, saying to somebody, give me 10 minutes or give me half an hour will be perfectly okay. The world isn't going to grind to a halt. Now, that is a sweeping statement. I'm very aware before, people start saying, but what about? Yes, I do realise there are situations where that isn't the case, but they, let's face it, are very few and far between. So buying yourself some time and space takes practice, but practice saying the words out loud. As I said last week, practice verbally. Verbal practice, I can't recommend it enough, so that the first time you hear these words, when they come from your mouth, is not right in front of that person who is the trigger or issue for you. That way, you will get some strength to your voice. You can think about your physiology, your posture, the tone of voice that you're going to use. People pleasing is often bound up with the ability to say no to people. Just remember this: every time you say no in one part of your, every time you say yes at work or in one part of your life, you are actually saying no in another part of your life, and you can bet your bottom dollar that's going to be to your detriment and your own sense of well-being. Okay, learn to trust yourself a little. So think back to times when you have stood your ground and shut down that people-pleasing part of you a little more and felt stronger and set yourself some boundaries. What was going on for you then? If you've done it once, you can do it again, and that might be an interesting pattern to track as well. So you could track the times when you are in people-pleasing mode and you can't say no, or you feel you can't say no, and the opposite, times when you have been able to stand your ground and you are able to set appropriate and effective boundaries. What's the difference? What's going on here? And the last thing I want to share with you is really getting a sense of perspective. What really matters? In one of my teaching jobs, and I'm going back a long time now, sort of 25 years, my head teacher got very ill and she had cancer and she did sadly die. But I remember her coming to school midway through her treatment, and this was pre-internet days, and she had a big inbox of letters that had been sent, and I remember her picking it up and just dumping it all in the bin. And I was a fairly new teacher at the time, and she looked at me, looking at her sort of wide-eyed, and she said, Sue, if it's important, they'll write back again or they'll pick up the phone and speak to me. And that taught me a huge lesson about perspective. Think about what else is going on. I think particularly at times like this is, I think, a time for all of us when we're reevaluating our choices, how we live our life. And I personally think that's one of the things that, when we are in the right place, that we might be able to take from these challenging situations and move forward with. So emotionally investing heavily in everyone you meet and you deal with is absolutely exhausting. You can't do it. Boundaries help us to do our jobs better, and they help us to be better parents, better partners, better siblings, better sons and daughters. Right, 20 minutes. I'm going to leave it there. Has anybody got any questions or any comments they'd like to make before I bring today's session to an end? We will be having the Friday catch-up. My task for this week isn't actually a task. 1 minute. It is actually, I'm going to recommend another book to you. So this is a brilliant book. It's called The Curse of Lovely, and written by a woman called Jackie Marson. And I can thoroughly recommend this book if you are in the grip of being a people pleaser. I found so much comfort in here. So she is a therapist therapeutic counsellor, and she shares some really interesting case studies and some lovely practical tools. So if you've got a reading list or a Kindle list, I would certainly think about adding that to it. It's a very useful read indeed. So, Steve, I'm glad that was been helpful for you. That's brilliant. Anybody else got any comments or questions that they would like to add? If so, please type it in the box for the last couple of minutes before I draw today's session to an end. And I will be back here 12:30 Friday lunchtime. And yeah, what happens on those sessions is people log in and we have a bit of a chat, answer a few questions depending on who is here. So Joe, very good. Oh, I'm glad it was helpful, very helpful, Joe. I think, it's just nice to jog our memories sometimes, isn't it? And think about strategies that we might have forgotten that we once used. Very much thanks. Pleasure, Steve, and a pleasure, Joe, as well. It's been great having you here. Okay, right, I'm going to bring this to an end, and I'm going to bring this to an end, go and make some lunch, and then hopefully spend some of the afternoon in the garden and finish my crochet. My husband's got the week off, but I am not able to take the whole week off. Nicola, thank you, perfect. I find pleasing everyone exhausting, and sometimes realise I spent the day pleasing everyone else and not myself. Exactly, and it is exhausting. Those of you who have this habit, you will recognise that. And like I always say, all the ideas I talk about, this is not about having a personality transplant and changing yourself overnight. It's tweaking your approach in situations that make those situations work for you as well as they do for other people. Okay, I'm going to bring this to an end, and have a lovely week, and I will speak to you all on Friday. Take very good care.